Hello and welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Thank you guys so much for being here. Big news. Big news. Julian Assange is going to be set free. Wow. Hard not to get emotional over this. Many of us have been following this case for a really long time, and it has been absolutely daunting for journalists, for those who value free speech, to follow this case and to think that Julian Assange could rot for the rest of his days in prison. But it looks like that is not going to be the case. In fact, just breaking news that Julian Assange has decided to plead guilty to one single felony count of illegally obtaining and disclosing national security material in exchange for his release. He's going home. He's going home, guys. He is due to appear in the North Mariana Islands on Wednesday, which is a U.S. territory. So they've agreed to get him to the U.S. territory in order to deal with the sentencing and the plea agreement. But it is very close to Australia. And he will essentially get time served and he will go home. Just like that. I mean, it's shocking. It's shocking. It's shocking. This is shocking. So he will appear before a federal judge. This is shocking. This is absolutely shocking. So this is going to go down 9 a.m. local time Wednesday. And then he goes home. I mean, I almost don't want to I want to believe it, obviously, because it's such great news, but I also don't want to believe it because I feel like, is this real? I mean, anything could happen between now and then. The ink is not dry, as they say. So barring any sort of serious intervention that happens between now and Wednesday at 9 a.m., it looks like Julian Assange will get time served. They're essentially going to give him 62 months in jail, which is what he's already served in the Belmarsh prison. And so they'll say, that's it, time served, bye. Go to Australia. I would imagine they might say you're never allowed to step foot in the United States again. I mean, I'm not sure. We'll see what else the judge says on Wednesday, but this is just absolutely shocking news that Julian Assange he's going to be let out. He's going to go home. He's 52 years old. He has been spending his time basically imprisoned for, oh gosh, I mean, how long has it been? Since 2011 or when was it that he went into the Ecuadorian embassy? I mean, he's been years and years and years, over a decade of just being unable to move freely, unable to live his life freely, locked up. Of course, the Ecuadorian embassy was a lot better than the Belmarsh prison, but still no freedom of movement, no freedom of his life, all because he exposed government war crimes. He exposed government secrets, which journalists should be allowed to do. This is a loss for journalists in some ways. He is pleading guilty, so there will be a guilty charge on him of obtaining and disclosing national security material. That is not good for journalists to have that precedent set. It's obviously very good personally for Julian Assange that they're not going to get him on, they're not pressing for really to throw the book at him and to have him rot in prison for the rest of his life. The fact that he'll be able to go home is obviously a huge win for him. It is still a loss for journalism when he is pleading guilty for this illegally obtaining and disclosing. That should not be illegal in this country. So it is just another nick on the United States deteriorating as a supposed democracy that is supposed to have a free press. That is the pillar of a free democracy, is a free press. To be able to call out government crimes, to be able to expose government crimes, you have to be able to do that. Otherwise, you don't live in a free country. And Julian Assange did that. Many other journalists have done that. And it is a loss that will be considered a crime. Once again, this is not the first time or the last time that this will be considered a crime. And that is something that we should be fighting back against. And every journalist, once this is once the shock is worn off of Julian Assange actually being out living his life freely again. I mean, when that, oh, could you imagine the images we're going to see on Wednesday or Thursday when he's out and just hopefully living his life and healing from the trauma of being locked up over this. Once all of that is worn off and the fanfare of Julian being home, I hope that all journalists take this back up, the cause of obtaining and disclosing national security material should not be a crime. That is what journalists are supposed to do. That's actually the job. And the government wants to make that a crime. And they have successfully made it a crime, and they've certainly successfully put a chilling effect on the situation. I mean, this is exactly what we saw recently with the New York Times. If you remember that they acted as the government's henchmen when they went and hunted down to identify Jack Teixeira, who had disclosed other government documents. Rather than just publish the documents and let it be as journalists, they instead decided to hunt down the whodidit and turn them over to the federal authorities. That could be argued that they did that in order to prevent a Julian Assange type outcome for the journalists who published those documents. They didn't want to be thrown in Belmarsh prison for years and years and to be and to rot away for over a decade. And so now journalists have turned to acting as government henchmen. And that is the precedent we don't want, but that is unfortunately the precedent that has been set. And this case with Julian Assange has certainly created that chilling effect where people are extremely frightened of having this sort of outcome. But this is a positive, the positive of them, of the pressure that has been put on the government, the pressure of if you go forward with really extraditing Julian Assange to the continental United States, where he then would face a trial, where he then would be potentially locked up for, I believe that he was facing, 170 years in federal prison. 170 years. Had they gone forward with something even remotely close to that, that would have been a much bigger scandal. It would have really shed light on how undemocratic the United States has become, how far gone we are as a country. This is lesser. Still, he's having to plead guilty to one count. They didn't want to just let him off the hook entirely, so I can kind of see where the government's perspective is. They've been going after him for so long, they didn't want to totally eat crow, and now they are, but they can't do it completely. So they said, all right, just plead guilty to one count, and then we'll move on from here. He was facing 18 counts, so it's quite a reduction. But it is shocking news to find out that he is going to be just appearing in front of a federal judge in the Mariana Islands, and then he's just going to go home. Wow. Well, we did it, I guess, right? All of us who were reporting on this, who were disgusted by this, imagine had we not been talking about Julian Assange ad nauseum, covering every aspect of his case, had we not been calling out the fact that it's so completely undemocratic to throw somebody who's leaked documents, who's published documents essentially that were leaked, had we not opened our mouths and spoken up, maybe Julian Assange would still be facing 170 years and rotting in prison for a lifetime. But when we speak up, when we use our voices and we say, we are not happy about this, this is a huge problem, this would be a massive issue for U.S., for democracy, for the American people. I don't know, guys. Did it work? It seems like it did. It seems like we actually accomplished something this time for once. Can we make this kind of change with other topics? Can we show that putting pressure on the government will lead to positive outcomes? I think so. I think that this shows us that if we just speak up and continue to protest, continue to rise up as the people, and we don't let the government off the hook, that they'll have to eventually do as the people want. Otherwise, they're looking at outcomes for them, they themselves as leaders of the country, that they don't really want. A variety of different scenarios that you could just imagine. So I think it works. I think what we see is massive outpouring of voices, people speaking up, and with clear. I think one really important point about this is not just speaking up and saying and protesting something, but having a clear goal of what it is we're looking for. And what everybody was looking for was something very specific. Leave Julian, let him go. Free Julian Assange. That is what we've been saying over and over. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. And now he's going to be freed. So it shows that our voices matter. We can rise up. We can actually make change by letting the government know our wishes, but especially if we have a clear goal in mind. So if you just say things that are totally and completely absurd, that are never going to happen, like abolish the police, right? Nobody ever really wants to abolish police. It's a catchy phrase. It's neat to say, I suppose, but it doesn't actually have meaning that is obtainable. There's this abstract notion of what that means, but abstract isn't good enough. You can't make change off of abstract ideas, especially when everybody's got a different abstract idea of that same exact phrase. It has to be clear cut. So even when you say things like free Palestine, you have to have a clear goal on what exactly does that mean? Because as we've seen, what do people do? They take that phrase and they distort it. They turn it into whatever they think it means because they're not hearing a clear, there isn't clear meaning on what that means to them. Free Julian Assange, on the other hand, unlike free Palestine, is extremely clear. The guy's sitting in jail. You want to free him out of jail. Very, very clear what that means. So it's important, I think, to use our voices, but it's also important to be extremely clear on what the demand is. And what we've seen with the Palestinian protests that have happened throughout college campuses, for example, is some of them had very clear demands. And they were able to take those very clear demands to the boards and the presidents of their schools. And they were able to actually come to an agreement because they made very clear and obtainable goals, obtainable demands. They said, we want a list of all of your investments in Israel. We want a list not only of your investments in Israel, but any war or any war profiteer styles company, any governments around the world. We want to know exactly where you're invested. So we want a list is what we want. We want you to then agree to divest from that list once you hand us over that list. We want, some real clear, some of them had actually extremely clear demands, and they were able to actually get those demands because they were very, very clear. So I think the point is we have to be clear whenever we're asking for something, when we're making a demand. Anger is one thing, and anger certainly gets people on the streets. Anger, shock, horror, just being totally and completely upset over something. That, like ending wars, for example, ending the Vietnam War, protesters went out there. It was very clear what the protesters wanted. They wanted to end the Vietnam War. And that sentiment grew and grew and grew and grew. And it was the United States that was perpetrating that war. And so that was an achievable, obtainable goal. We haven't seen, unfortunately, large protests about ending the war in Afghanistan. That was something that took 20 years. It eventually did end. But could it have ended earlier had Americans spoken up and made their voices heard much greater, louder, with clear, definitive, this is what we're looking for? So I think it works. I think this is amazing. This has worked. The administration did not want to deal with the drama and the protests and the outcry that would happen had Julian Assange had to face an actual trial in the United States. That would have been an optics nightmare for Democrats, or Republicans. Nobody wants it. So this was just like a clean and easy way to get to deal with to just be done with it. But had we not cared, they wouldn't have either. And that is the main point. That is the main and incredible point. But it's absolutely incredible. Julian Assange, he's gonna be let go. He's gonna go home. I mean, I'm just in absolute shock. I'm in absolute shock that this is actually happening, and I won't believe it until I actually see it. I need to see it. I need to see him standing in Australia, totally and completely free, in front of the microphones, as a free man. I need to see that. I need to see the ink dry on the court case that says, we're no longer pursuing this. It is done. I don't want to hear about any sort of, well, we reserve the right to come after you again. No, I want to see that it is over and that Julian Assange is free. And I won't fully believe this until I see that. But wow, what news, guys. What absolute news. Thank you so much for watching this clip from the full show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. Thank you guys so much for watching.